Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine you're in a busy diner, the clink of cutlery and murmur of voices filling the air. You're down to your last few dollars, trying to figure out how to pay for a simple meal. Now, open your eyes. The person at the next table. It's Barron Trump. This isn't just a thought experiment. For Jack, a struggling father in Cleveland, this surreal scenario became reality. What Barron did next will make you question your assumptions and perhaps inspire you to look at the world a little differently. The bustling diner on the outskirts of Cleveland was a microcosm of the city's diverse population. The aroma of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon filled the air, mingling with the chatter of patrons and the clink of utensils against plates. Amid this lively atmosphere, Jack sat alone, his weathered face a stark contrast to the cheerful buzz around him. Jack's calloused hands wrapped around a chipped mug, the coffee inside long since gone cold. His eyes, heavy with worry, darted between the small pile of coins on the table and the worn leather wallet in his lap. The weight of unpaid bills and a sick child at home pressed heavily on his shoulders, each breath a reminder of the mounting pressure. As he fumbled with his wallet, a few coins slipped from his trembling fingers, clattering onto the linoleum floor. The sound seemed to echo in Jack's ears, drawing unwanted attention. He felt his cheeks flush with embarrassment as he bent to retrieve them, his work-worn boots scuffing against the floor. Just then, the bell above the diner's door chimed, and a tall figure stepped inside. The young man's presence seemed to shift the energy in the room, curious glances following his every move. It was Barron Trump, seeking a moment of respite from the constant scrutiny that accompanied his family name. Barron's eyes scanned the diner, taking in the scene before him. His gaze settled on Jack, hunched over his table, the man's distress palpable even from across the room. Something in Jack's demeanor struck a chord with Barron, a flicker of recognition passing across his face. As Barron made his way to the counter, he couldn't help but steal glances at Jack. The man's weathered appearance and the obvious struggle etched into his features stirred something within the young Trump. It was a feeling he couldn't quite place, a mixture of curiosity and an unexpected tug of empathy. Jack, oblivious to the attention he had garnered, continued to count his meager funds. His fingers trembled as he pushed the coins around, the metal cool against his skin. Each clink seemed to echo the ticking of a clock, counting down the moments until he'd have to face the harsh reality of his situation. Barron found himself drawn to Jack's table, his feet moving of their own accord. As he approached, he caught snippets of Jack's mumbled words, something about medicine and overdue rent. The young man's heart tightened, a stark reminder of the vast divide between his world and the struggles faced by so many others. The scene was set for an encounter that would challenge perceptions on both sides. Barron, raised in a world of privilege, stood on the precipice of a moment that could reshape his understanding of the world. Jack, worn down by life's hardships, was unaware that his fortunes were about to take an unexpected turn. As Barron approached Jack's table, his presence stood in stark contrast to the worn surroundings. Jack's eyes widened, his hands frozen mid-motion, while counting his meager change. For a moment, they stared at each other, an invisible chasm of experience and privilege stretching between them like a vast, uncharted ocean. Barron's gaze flickered over Jack's face, taking in the deep lines etched by years of worry and hard work. There was something in those eyes that struck a chord within him, a depth of experience his sheltered upbringing had never exposed him to. The young Trump felt an unexpected surge of empathy, mingled with a sudden awareness of his own privilege. Jack's fingers tightened around his mug, bracing himself for judgment. But as he met Barron's eyes, he saw something different, a genuine interest, perhaps even a flicker of understanding. The silence stretched between them, taut as a wire. Barron took a deep breath, steeling himself. He was used to being in the spotlight, but this felt different, more personal, more real. With a slight tremor in his voice that betrayed his nervousness, he broke the ice. Mind if I join you? Barron asked, gesturing to the empty seat across from Jack. The simple question caught Jack off guard. He blinked, his brow furrowing as he processed the request. Sure, Jack replied, his voice rough with surprise, though I'm not sure I'll be much company. As Barron slid into the seat, the diner seemed to collectively exhale. The spell of silence was broken, replaced by a low buzz of whispered conversations. Patrons leaned towards each other, speculation running wild about what could possibly bring these two vastly different individuals together. The whispers faded as Barron's gaze settled on Jack's worn attire. The son of a billionaire and a struggling father sat face to face, an unlikely pair in the bustling diner. The distance between their worlds seemed insurmountable, yet a simple gesture was about to bridge that gap. Barron leaned forward, his eyes filled with genuine curiosity. "Tell me about yourself, Jack," he said softly, his voice barely audible above the clatter of dishes and hum of conversation around them. Jack hesitated, his weathered hands fidgeting with the handle of his coffee mug. For a moment, the weight of his struggles seemed too heavy to share. But there was something in Barron's expression, an openness, a lack of judgment, that made Jack's reservations melt away. He began to speak, his voice low and halting at first, then gaining strength as his story unfolded. He spoke of long hours at the factory, of sleepless nights worrying about bills, and of the constant fear that one missed paycheck could topple the fragile house of cards that was his family's stability. As Jack spoke, Barron listened intently, his brow furrowed in concentration. The young man's mind raced, trying to comprehend a life so different from his own. He thought of the gilded halls of Trump Tower, of private jets and luxury vacations. For the first time, he truly understood the enormity of his privilege. Jack's voice cracked as he mentioned his daughter's illness, the mounting medical bills that threatened to drown them. I don't know how we're going to make it," he admitted, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. The raw vulnerability in Jack's voice stirred something deep within Barron. Without a word, Barron's hand moved towards his wallet. Jack noticed the motion and stiffened, pride warring with desperation. "I don't want charity," he said quickly, his cheeks flushing with embarrassment. Barron paused, understanding the delicate balance between offering help and preserving dignity. "It's not charity, Jack," Barron said softly. "It's one human being helping another. We're all in this together, aren't we?" His words hung in the air between them, a bridge of understanding spanning the chasm of their different lives. With a subtle gesture, Barron caught the waitress's eye. She approached, sensing the weight of the moment. As she placed the bill on the table, Barron reached for it, his movements deliberate and thoughtful. Jack watched, his heart pounding, as Barron's pen hovered over the paper. In that moment, time seemed to stand still. The bustle of the diner faded away, leaving only the scratch of pen on paper. When Barron finally looked up, there was a quiet determination in his eyes. He folded the bill carefully, hiding the amount from view, and handed it to the waitress with a nod. As she walked away, Barron turned back to Jack. "I hope this helps," he said simply, "and I hope you remember that kindness can come from unexpected places. We're all capable of making a difference, no matter who we are or where we come from." As Jack's fingers trembled, reaching for the folded paper, the diner seemed to hold its collective breath. Jack's weathered hands unfolded the bill, with a mixture of curiosity and trepidation. His eyes widened, scanning the numbers repeatedly. The color drained from his face, then rushed back in a tide of emotion. Jack's mouth opened, but no words came out. He looked up at Barron, disbelief etched across his features. Barron, usually guarded in public, found himself deeply moved by Jack's reaction. He watched as the older man's eyes welled with tears, a lifetime of struggle finding release in this unexpected moment of kindness. The young Trump heir felt a lump forming in his own throat. I can't accept this," Jack finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's too much." Barron leaned in, his voice low and earnest. "Please, Jack, it's not charity. It's one human being helping another, like you said earlier. Jack's gaze dropped back to the bill, then to his own calloused hands. Pride warred with gratitude on his face, a battle playing out in the furrow of his brow and the set of his jaw. "My daughter," Jack began, his voice thick with emotion. This could cover her treatments for months. "I don't know how to thank you." Barron shook his head, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "You don't have to thank me, Jack. Just pay it forward when you can." Jack's calloused hand reached out, grasping Barron's in a firm shake. The contrast was stark, Jack's hands rough from years of manual labor, Barron's smooth and unmarked. Yet in that moment, the divide between their worlds seemed to narrow. "I will," Jack promised, his eyes meeting Barron's with newfound determination. As they stood to leave, whispers rippled through the crowd. Jack paused at the door, turning back to Barron. "You know, I used to think all you rich folks were the same. But you've shown me today that I was wrong. Thank you for that lesson, too." Barron nodded, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. As Jack stepped out into the Cleveland afternoon, Barron knew that this encounter would leave an indelible mark on both their lives. As the diner door swung shut behind Jack, a peculiar silence fell over the room. The initial shock of Barron's generosity gave way to something even more extraordinary. The young billionaire's heir felt an unexpected urge to learn more about this struggling working-class father. "Would you mind sitting down for a moment?" Barron asked, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. Jack hesitated, his eyes darting between Barron and the door. The weight of the world seemed to press down on his shoulders, but curiosity won out. He slowly lowered himself into the seat, the vinyl cushion creaking beneath him. For a moment, neither spoke. The clatter of dishes and murmur of conversations around them filled the air, creating a cocoon of white noise. Barron leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table. "Tell me about your daughter," he said softly, his voice free of judgment or pity. Jack's eyes widened, surprised by the young man's genuine interest. He took a deep breath, and the story spilled out like water from a broken dam. He spoke of sleepless nights spent by his daughter's hospital bed, of the crushing weight of medical bills that seemed to multiply with each passing day. His voice trembled as he described the gut-wrenching choice between buying groceries or paying for his child's medication. As Jack spoke, Barron listened intently, his brow furrowed in concentration. The young Trump heir had never known such hardship, and each word painted a vivid picture of a world he had only glimpsed from afar. He asked thoughtful questions, revealing a depth of empathy that belied his years and privileged upbringing. "How do you cope with the uncertainty?" Barron asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Jack's weathered hands clasped together on the table. "You just do," he replied, his eyes distant. "You wake up each day, put one foot in front of the other, and hope that somehow, some way, things will get better." As their conversation deepened, the invisible barriers of class and status seemed to dissolve. They were no longer a billionaire's son and a struggling factory worker, but two human beings sharing a moment of genuine connection. Jack found himself opening up about his dreams for his daughter's future, the simple joys that kept him going, and the fear that gnawed at him each night. Around them, other diners pretended not to listen, but their attention was rapt. Forks hovered midway between plates and mouths. Coffee grew cold in forgotten mugs. The waitress, a woman who had seen countless stories unfold within these walls, found herself lingering nearby, drawn by the raw humanity of the moment. As their dialogue unfolded, both men found their preconceptions challenged. Barron realized that the strength and resilience of those living on the economic margins far surpassed anything he had imagined. Jack, in turn, saw beyond the Trump name and wealth, recognizing the compassion and desire to understand in the young man before him. The air in the diner crackled with an electric energy as Barron and Jack's conversation deepened. Their unlikely connection had become a magnetic force, drawing the attention of everyone present. Patrons who had been focused on their own meals and conversations found their gazes irresistibly pulled towards the odd pair. At first, the change was subtle. A few heads turned, eyebrows raised in curiosity. But as the minutes ticked by, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The usual din of clinking cutlery and casual chatter faded to a low murmur, punctuated by whispers and the occasional gasp of recognition. A middle-aged woman in a business suit leaned towards her companion, her voice barely above a whisper. "Is that really him? With that man?" Her friend nodded, eyes wide with disbelief. Across the room, a group of college students huddled together, their phones held low as they surreptitiously snapped photos. The waitstaff moved with exaggerated care, their steps measured and quiet as they navigated the tables. They exchanged meaningful glances, silently communicating their shared awe at the unfolding scene. One young waiter, carrying a pot of coffee, found himself frozen in place, captivated by the warmth emanating from the unlikely duo. As the conversation between Barron and Jack continued, a palpable shift occurred in the diner's collective consciousness. The initial shock and curiosity gave way to something deeper, more profound. Strangers began to make eye contact, sharing small smiles of wonder and appreciation. An elderly man, his face etched with years of experience, slowly rose from his booth. With deliberate steps, he approached Barron and Jack's table. "Excuse me," he said, his voice wavering slightly. "I couldn't help but overhear. I just wanted to say, well, thank you, both of you, for reminding us what really matters." His words seemed to break an invisible barrier. Suddenly, others found the courage to approach. A young mother, tears glistening in her eyes, stopped to squeeze Jack's shoulder. "Your strength is inspiring," she murmured before hurrying away. The diner had transformed into a microcosm of society, but one where the usual divisions of class and status had momentarily dissolved. People from all walks of life found themselves drawn together, united by the simple yet powerful act of kindness they had witnessed. A group of teenagers, initially engrossed in their phones, now engaged in an animated discussion about privilege and responsibility. An interracial couple, who had been quietly enjoying their meal, now held hands openly on the table, their faces alight with renewed hope. Even those who had initially regarded the scene with skepticism found themselves affected. A gruff-looking man, in a worn leather jacket, who had been scowling into his coffee, was now listening intently to his neighbor's excited chatter about community outreach programs. As the ripples of change spread through the diner, it became clear that Barron's act of kindness had sparked something far greater than a single moment of generosity. It had reignited a sense of shared humanity, a reminder that compassion knows no boundaries of wealth or social status. As the afternoon sun filtered through the diner's windows, casting a warm glow on the worn linoleum, Barron Trump's demeanor shifted. The young man, often seen but rarely heard, began to open up to Jack. His words, carefully chosen and tinged with a vulnerability rarely associated with his family name, revealed a depth of thought at odds with public perception. "You know, Jack," Barron began, his voice soft but steady, "people see the name, the wealth, the lifestyle, but they don't see the person behind it all." He paused, running a hand through his hair, a gesture that spoke of both nervousness and determination. "I've spent years watching my father in the spotlight, seeing how every action, every word, can be twisted or misunderstood." Jack listened intently, his own preconceptions about the Trump family challenged with each passing moment. The man before him wasn't the caricature often portrayed in the media, but a young adult grappling with the weight of expectations and a genuine desire to make a difference. Barron's eyes shone with a mix of determination and vulnerability as he continued, "I've been given so much, Jack, more than most people could ever dream of. But with that comes a responsibility, a duty to do something meaningful with it all." He gestured around the diner, taking in the diverse array of patrons. "I want to connect with people, to understand their struggles and their triumphs, not from behind a podium or through a TV screen, but face to face, like this." As Barron spoke, Jack found himself offering words of encouragement to the young man. The roles of giver and receiver blurred as they exchanged life wisdom. Jack, drawing from years of hard-won experience, shared insights on perseverance and the importance of staying true to oneself in the face of adversity. "You're more than just your name, Barron," Jack said, his voice warm with newfound respect. "What you did today, it wasn't about the money. It was about seeing someone in need and reaching out. That's something no amount of wealth can buy." Barron nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "That's exactly it, Jack. I want to use my position to create real change, not just for show or publicity. It's about human connection, about breaking down the barriers that keep us apart." As their conversation drew to a close, Barron's motivations came into sharp focus. This wasn't just a simple act of charity or a publicity stunt. It was a young man's attempt to forge his own path, to define himself beyond the shadow of his famous family. The encounter between Barron Trump and Jack in that Cleveland diner sparked a wave of compassion through the community. Local businesses reported an uptick in random acts of kindness, with the diner becoming a symbol of hope. Patrons left larger tips and engaged in deeper conversations with strangers. "It's like people suddenly remembered we're all human," said Sarah, the diner's owner. Jack found ways to pay forward the kindness he received. "This experience taught me that everyone has a story," he reflected.
The story reminds us that compassion transcends class and status. Let's challenge ourselves to look beyond appearances and reach out to those in need, bridging social divides one connection at a time.